It's November, it's Action Movie Month, and it's time to review the ROBOCOP remake. And you know what? I'd buy it for $1.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
ROBOCOP stars Joel Kinnaman, Michael Keaton, Gary Oldman, and is directed by Jose Padilla. What is up, guys? Welcome to a non-horror review. We're going to do the ROBOCOP remake. Wasn't planning on doing this, but it's November, and in November, we do like Epic Movie Month in my house, and we watched this, and I was like, you know what? I want to review this movie, because this came out before I even started my channel. I think like 2014, 13, something like that. I can't remember when this one came out, but I remember going out and buying the Steelbook. I believe this was from Target. And I remember when I first watched the movie, it was very meh. It was just very lackluster. Nothing very special. But I will say, this was before Joel Kinnaman was Joel Kinnaman. And I'm not saying he's like Tom Cruise or anything right now, but the guy's made more of a name for himself. Starring in Altered Carbon, Suicide Squad. You know, he's popped up in a lot of things since doing this movie, and when I saw this, I didn't even know who the guy was. And this is kind of before the resurgence of Michael Keaton. If you remember, Michael Keaton had kind of a lull in his career, and he came back and he did Birdman, and he did this movie too. I think Birdman was after this movie. But then, ever since Birdman, he's gotten a lot of bigger parts, and you know, he's become a household name again. I mean, he's always been a household name. He's freaking Batman, but still, there was quite a lull in his career for a while. So this movie really didn't have much going for it at the time. So it's interesting to go back and watch the movie now that these stars are actually, you know, they're at the top of their game now. You know, sometimes I think that can affect our viewing of a film. You know, I guess it's like star context, you know, for lack of a better phrase. You know, the context of how big the actual star is when the movie comes out. But anyway, jumping into this, quick plot synopsis. It's kind of the same story as the original. You have Alex Murphy. He is a cop, and he's really good at his job. He's undercover, like deep undercover at the beginning of the movie with this crime outfit. And right at the point where we start getting to know his family, boom, this explosion happens. He goes out to his car. He's all but dead, you know, pretty much after this car explosion. You know, most of his body's like burned. He's pretty much left to nothing. And I would say even worse than in the original. He's in like the worst shape possible. Meanwhile, the very beginning of the movie, we see all the robots in action. Michael Keaton plays Raymond Sellers. He is the CEO of Omnicorp. And Omnicorp, they're trying to take over the law enforcement division, lessening the need for actual human cops. You know, they have these robots. They do this demonstration at the beginning. And it's just proof that, hey, we don't have to put our people in harm's way. You can use these robots and whatnot. But there's this court hearing, and in the hearing, they state that taking out the human element can complicate things, which it would. And so the next phase in this program is for Sellers to come up with a more human-friendly, humane robot. And this is when they find out about Alex Murphy and his explosion. You know, he's like the perfect candidate. He's next to death's door, and so they rebuild him. Kind of like the $6 Million Man, I guess. And he becomes ROBOCOP. In the first half of the movie, too, it's more of a psychological type of thing. You know, I like that they do explore the psychological damage that this character would have, and they explore that in the original, too. But they really lean heavily on it in this movie, you know, all the way down to how it would affect his family. You know, this is a guy that can't live with his family anymore. Can you imagine that your spouse, your husband doesn't die, although technically he should be dead, but he's literally like 15% human. He's all robot, and his job is to 100% work for law enforcement. He can't be a husband again. He can't be a father again. And so they explore that. There's these moments in the movie where Alex, you know, comes home to see his wife and see his child, but he's more of just a visitor than an actual part of the family. And again, it explores all those troubles that this family would have, that his wife would have. Played by Abby Cornish, by the way, who I'm a big fan of Abby Cornish. She's excellent in just about everything she's in. There's like a darkness to her, and she brings that to like every role that she does. And she does a good job in this, actually. I actually liked her. Now, aesthetically, the silver suit in this movie made me want to throw up. It just doesn't have that charisma, that charm that the original silver suit had in the first movie, or the original movie. It's just not as badass, I guess, for lack of a better term. It feels like the Dollar Tree version of the 1987 version, from the suit standpoint. Now, once he gets into the black suit, now we're talking. I like the look of the black suit. It's sleek, it's modern, it fits into the current time frame, even though this takes place in the future, 2028, which is only 8 years from now. But yeah, no problem with the black suit whatsoever. And you know what? It's kind of a lesson in remakes in general. I don't mind you adding differences in remakes, as long as they're good differences. They're upgrades, and that's really what this is, upgrade. Speaking of upgrade, by the way, gee whiz, Logan Marshall Green was actually trying to get the part in this. And that would have been interesting, but because Logan Marshall Green is a great actor, he ended up doing Upgrade, which is a similar type of character. He just didn't have like a suit on. Now, a key player in this is Dr. Dennett Norton, played by Gary Oldman. And he's the guy that Sellers constantly has to go to fine-tune Murphy. Murphy's not, he's messed up in the head. I need Norton to fix that. I don't care how you fix it, just fix it, That's what a CEO does. CEO doesn't care about the nuts and bolts. He just says, do it, just get it done. That's what I pay you for. And so that's where Norton comes into play. And there's a part in the movie where they're doing this training in this like warehouse, and Murphy can't keep up with the robots. He always has that human element holding him back. And so eventually they have to kind of dial him back, pull back the humanity from him and almost turn him into just a full-on robot. Norton finds a way to kind of trick Murphy's brain into thinking that he's more human than he actually is. And so it's kind of like the best of both worlds. As soon as he goes into combat mode, that part of his brain turns off. And he doesn't even know it. Once he goes back into human mode, turns back on. Which makes sense to me, actually. Also got to talk about Jackie Earle Haley. He plays Maddox. He's the trainer. I just love Jackie Earle Haley. He just has this charisma about him, this devil-may-care attitude. And really, it's just his delivery. I always like his delivery in these types of films. I was getting Rorschach vibes like here and there, just little nuggets of Rorschach in his performance in this movie. And that made me happy. It made me giddy because I love him as Rorschach. And he's just like the trainer that doesn't really give a shit, These robots are my babies. And I don't really care about the whole, like, the financial part of it and the CEO part of it. I just want to do my thing as the trainer. And I dug that about him. He kind of reminds me of Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive. How Tommy Lee Jones, he didn't care. The mission was the most important thing, and anything outside of the mission is just in the way. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. That's pretty much what Maddox is in this. Now let's talk about the cons of this movie, because there are plenty. Overall, it just doesn't have that the dark humor that the original does, and that's Paul Verhoeven. Paul Verhoeven movies, they have just this weird element of comedy that you don't see in other action movies, and they're also just bloody as hell. He does not hold back in terms of sex and violence and dark humor, and that's what made the original so special. It's unlike any other action movie, still to this day, that I've ever seen. And this feels like a watered down version of that movie. And it's hard to compare this. Like, Paul Verhoeven's not directing this, so of course it's not going to be a Paul Verhoeven movie. In Jose Padilla's defense, though, he has stated behind the scenes that there was just constant studio meddling. The budget got pretty big, and of course they wanted that PG-13 rating, and they diluted the movie down. It just didn't have that kick about it. It didn't have that edge that the original had. And so at the end, it's kind of a wasted effort. On the flip side of that, the second half of this movie, I really like. If you take the RoboCop from 1987 out of your brain, I think you can really enjoy the second half of this movie and how it turns into Alex solving his own murder. And the action really kicks up, and I'm really into Joel Kinnaman's performance in this section of the movie. And to me, it worked. I was pleasantly surprised because at first I was just like, it just feels like the watered down version of the original. But I would say give this movie another chance because I actually did like the second half of it. I actually did have a good time with it. One scene that I did dig too is like when they're having this big like town rally or whatever, and they're showing off Alex for the first time, and he comes out there and there's this like criminal like right in the crowd, and there's two cops like right behind the criminal, and of course they don't know that he's a criminal, and he can detect that in like a moment's notice. And so I liked how that scene played out. You know, he detected the criminal and then immediately just freaking beelined right for him.
Thomas King, you're under arrest.
And that really just shows how effective and how dangerous the RoboCop character can be. And because this is a modern film, you can take advantage of the technology today, and I think they do for the most part in the action sequences. It is sleeker. It is more like straightforward in terms of action's sake. They had limitations in the 80s, and of course they worked around them, and it made those movies special, but I like that this movie doesn't completely depend on the 80s, and we got to copy that, you know? I do applaud them for that and saying, hey, let's make this a RoboCop for the modern day, because RoboCop is just an irresistible character. And after watching this movie, I would have loved a sequel, you know? Because we'll probably end up getting another remake down the line, which I hate when they do that. I always say, even if people don't like the first movie, stay the course, continue the story, because they might like the second movie, and maybe it'll bring them back to the first movie. I don't know. But overall, high humdrum. That's what I give this. The second half of the movie really saves it. I like Joel Kinnaman's performance. I liked Michael Keaton as Sellers. And I'm glad I gave it another chance. So anyway, guys, in the comments, post your thoughts on the RoboCop remake. I know I'm going to get a lot of different opinions on this movie. I will say, if you've seen it one time, give it another shot, especially if you've seen it like when it first came out. Might surprise you this time. Anyway, guys, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day on Fridays. We do free for all Fridays. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Drumdum out.